In the world of extraction games, it was always bound that Dungeons & Dragons was going to seep its way in somehow, because everybody loves wizards and clerics and fighters. So today we're going to be talking about the leading competitors inside of that space, which is going to be Dungeonborne and Dark & Darker. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Gummerak, and I like to bring you my opinions about the games I get to try out to see if they're even worth your time or not. Some of the information that you're going to hear today may even be a little bit outdated, but go ahead and hit the subscription button and hit the bell notification to know when I put up more videos, because my time's a little limited. We're currently at this for the channel, and I can't thank you guys enough for being interested in my content and subscribing. The video today is not going to be a full in-depth review of the two games, more than my opinion on the things that I experienced in the 30 hours or less that I got to play both of them together, and then we'll wrap the video up with which one I think you should play. The fantasy genre has always been one that's been extremely difficult either to get right when it comes to the player base, because most players have a expectation level to how they want their fantasy games to be based off of either playing Dungeons & Dragons itself or reading books or any other idea that they've come up with when it comes to fantasy. You either strike gold with it or you strike out. One of the major problems that comes with this is the fact that people want to constantly do comparisons. So anytime you have an extraction game of any type, they want to compare it to their beloved game of Tarkov, which I find to be ridiculous in this instance because, well, this is a Dungeons & Dragons style game. What comparison could you possibly make to it other than being an extraction game? But it does, however, make sense to compare the two games that we have here today together because they're both in the same genre as well as the same mechanics. The first thing that we should touch on is the actual gameplay style for each game. As while the games are designed around the same type of material, they play drastically different from each other, and it's a completely different kind of direction for each kind of game, even if the base route is very similar. The base is your standardized battle royale extraction type game in which you're going to be facing either a clock or a squeezing zone, and either to get you out of the zone by forcing you to extract or die trying. Both games feature the ability to be able to find loot and scavenge throughout the entire place, and even have additional levels where things get harder. So what exactly is the difference between the two, and why should you choose one over the other, if not play both of them? Mostly it boils down to art direction, which is somewhat the same but not quite, and also play style. While both games have their complexities in how they are actually played, their play styles boil down to being more tactical and being more action-based in combat. Now, that's not to say that either one of these two games is less tactical than the other, but there's a huge difference between the way that you play them, and your tactics will vary between those two play styles. Dark & Darker is a little slower and requires more methodical planning on how you're going to be handling things in group composition when you go into it. The combat is slower, but has more impact when you actually make connections with body parts or armor, where with Dungeonborne you're going to be more action-based. The fighting could go on for a very short period or a longer period based on skill level, but it's definitely more of a fighting combat sim than it is an actual tactical decision that you make. But because the action is faster and there is more ways of sustaining your life inside of Dungeonborne, it does have a more thrilling action-based combat if you want your combat to have more movement and more plays than actually having maybe one-shot somebody. In Dark & Darker, you can easily one-shot somebody by hitting them in the head or having the right placement, and there's also a big push in Dark & Darker to appropriately fight each other with blocks and parries than there is when it comes to the straight-up combat inside of Dungeonborne. Both of them require you playing and learning the basics of the combat and either to stand a chance in any kind of fight. Just one of them will certainly be slower than the other, And one of them will definitely be because you planned out how you were going to fight that person more than it is to just straight jump into combat. With Dungeonborne, you actually have to think about who you're fighting for the specific class type than you do more so about what is happening on the screen at the very second. Although that will come into play, obviously, because you're in a live PvP environment. Dark and Darker, on the other hand, does require you have more knowledge of the map in order to outplay your opponents. Overall, I prefer the more action-based in Dungeonborne than I do Dark and Darker, but Dark and Darker definitely has its own feel and base when it comes to how you want to play your type of game. People who are more into a tactical style of game are going to be more drawn to Dark and Darker because Dark and Darker is more based on knowledge of the game than it is in Dungeonborne. In Dungeonborne, while you do require knowledge inside of the game, you can easily get into a one-on-one fight inside of that game and not know what you're doing and come out ahead. I find the PvP to be more enjoyable when it comes to that style of play in Dungeonborne because I'm more relaxed and I'm not as tensed into the moment. And that is all based on how you enjoy your games. There's lots of people who love that intense moment right before a fight, which used to be me, but as I get older, I notice that I want more and more just to be able to get into a fight, survive it, and extract and actually make some progress in that manner without spending a lot of time playing cat and mouse. However, there is one major difference between the two titles that I think will draw a line between most players, and that is the fact that the games are not totally free. In the case of Dungeonborne, you can play the entire game for free and expect a monetization model like any other free-to-play game. However, in Dark and Darker, you can play it for free for one character. And if you want to play any of the other characters, you either have to delete your character or buy the $30 package to be able to play the game with more than one character. I'm certainly not throwing any shade on the fact that that is a thing inside of Dark and Darker because they have to monetize the game in some form or fashion to be able to pay their staff and keep the game running. But I do believe it will drive a divisive line for most players because of the sheer value that you get out of Dungeonborne alone. It's essentially the same type of game with a different play style that you can get adjusted to, but you can play it completely for free. At the end of the day, though, which one would I choose? Well, frankly, I would choose Dungeonborne, just simply because the playstyle better suits my needs. That doesn't make it any better of a game than Dark and Darker, and vice versa. The games are equally good in both their parts for what they are, and you either enjoy them for the specific playstyle that they have developed on their type of game, or you don't. And that is the only difference really between the two. But as we've said before on this channel, there's no reason to try a free-to-play game, no matter what the caveats are. If the game is well designed, you should just give it a shot. You never know, you might like it. On that note, thank you guys very much for watching the video, and I am sorry it has taken so long to get something out. One of the members of the family lost their job, so we had an income shortage, and just other things just took priority in my life, and I just stopped everything basically. And I did a little bit of streaming, but I really didn't put a whole lot of time into it because I was balancing how we were living in our household because things got pretty tight. As well as that, we had a lot of grief that we had to work through because we had lost friends and family members and even a family pet. So things got pretty crazy here for a while. Thank you guys for watching the video again. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.